The world is shifting. The old order, cracking. The era of uncontested U.S. dominance fading. A multipolar world is emerging, where power is no longer held by one, but divided among many. Russia, China, India, the European Union. Regional powers across the globe are asserting themselves. And Washington? It's struggling to adapt. So the question is, can the U.S. keep up? Can Washington still lead in this new world? Or is America losing its grip? One crisis, one failure, one lost war at a time? Stay with us because by the end of this video, you'll understand the brutal reality. The U.S. strategy is failing, and if Washington doesn't wake up soon, the American century, it might be over. For decades, America was the superpower. After the Cold War, it stood alone. No rival, no competition. The U.S. dollar controlled global finance. The U.S. military could intervene anywhere, anytime. U.S. culture dominated screens, airwaves, and economies across the planet. But today, that world is gone. Look at China. Just 30 years ago, it was a manufacturing hub for cheap goods. Today, it's a technological powerhouse. Hypersonic missiles, AI surveillance, space exploration. China isn't catching up anymore, it's competing. And Russia, despite sanctions, its economy hasn't collapsed. It's forging new trade routes. It's leveraging military power in Ukraine, the Middle East, and Africa. The ruble may not be strong, but Moscow is proving one thing. U.S. pressure isn't what it used to be. Meanwhile, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are expanding their influence. The petrodollar, under attack. Global trade, becoming less dependent on the U.S. financial systems. Alternative networks are rising, bypassing Washington's control. And the EU, no longer America's lapdog. France is calling for strategic autonomy. Germany is strengthening ties with China. Even NATO members question U.S. leadership. The world isn't unipolar anymore. And that means the U.S. can't play by the same rules. The biggest problem? Washington still acts like it's 1991. Like U.S. power is absolute, but every move it makes backfires. Afghanistan? A disaster. A 20-year war ending in a humiliating withdrawal. Iraq? Left in chaos. Libya? A failed state. Ukraine? A proxy war bleeding U.S. resources while Russia adapts. Even economic warfare isn't working. The U.S. sanctions Russia. Moscow strengthens ties with China and India. The U.S. pressures China. Beijing accelerates its self-reliance. The U.S. tries to isolate Iran. Tehran deepens its partnerships with Russia and Saudi Arabia. And then there's the national debt. $34 trillion and rising. Endless spending. Printing money. How long before the dollar itself is at risk? This isn't just bad policy. This is Washington failing to adapt, clinging to an old playbook in a new world. Here's the real problem. Every region has its own rising power now. In America, it's being pushed out. In Asia, China is rewriting the rules. The Belt and Road Initiative is binding nations into its economic orbit. Countries that once depended on the U.S., now looking to Beijing. In the Middle East, Saudi Arabia no longer takes orders from Washington. It's cutting oil deals with China. It's normalizing relations with Iran. The U.S. isn't calling the shots anymore. In Africa, Russian and Chinese investments are outpacing the West. The U.S. talks about democracy. Beijing builds roads, ports, and infrastructure. And leaders? They notice. In Latin America, anti-U.S. sentiment is rising. Brazil is strengthening BRICS. Mexico is increasing economic ties with China. This is the new reality. America isn't the only player anymore. And in some places, it's not even the strongest. So what now? Can Washington adjust before it's too late? There's still hope, but it requires a complete shift in strategy. First, economic strength must be restored. The U.S. needs to invest in its own industrial base. Manufacturing, infrastructure, technology. Relying on China for key resources? That's a suicide mission. America needs self-reliance. Second, military power must be redefined. The Pentagon still focuses on expensive, outdated war machines. But future conflicts, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence-driven strategies, Small, smart, flexible forces. America needs to innovate or risk losing dominance altogether. Third, alliances must evolve. The U.S. can't dictate terms anymore. It must build genuine partnerships, treating allies like equals, not subordinates. That means deeper cooperation with India, ASEAN nations, and even reassessing its approach to Europe. And finally, diplomacy must return. For too long, Washington's foreign policy has been threats, sanctions, and military force. But power today isn't just about weapons, it's about influence. And America is losing it. This is the moment of truth. The world is changing, fast. In the US, it has two options: adapt or decline. Can Washington still lead in a multipolar world? Yes, but not by pretending it's still the 20th century. The rules have changed. The players have changed. And if America doesn't change too, then the American century won't just end, it will be replaced. So what do you think? Is the US still the dominant power, or is its grip slipping? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to understand the battles shaping our world, subscribe to Econ Atlas. This is where geopolitics meets reality, where power struggles are exposed, and where history unfolds in real time. Hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.